By the way, we have to talk about the epidemic of straight male guests on podcasts who are using their girlfriend slash spouse's
Uh,
Zoom account.
I don't know how to change the name. It just because it just like opens out of the email and it just like goes into her Zoom. But
Mm,
I don't have like I have a laptop, but it's super old and I don't want to, you know what I mean? Once you don't touch a computer for a while, it's a whole nightmare to
mm.
get it working again. And like, so yeah, it probably is. I'm sure you encounter it a lot. I
Oh,
just,
so
yeah,
many.
I don't know how I can change the name. Is that, yeah, I suppose it
It's
doesn't matter.
it's
You know
okay.
who I am, but
I know who
yeah.
you are.
You know, he's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, or moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Welcome back to the new and some would say improved version of the Getting Lit podcast. Um, Matt Fresta joins me, and Matt has been a guest before. You might remember, I think the last appearance was the Kinks marathon episode where we went through. Did we go through the entire Kinks discography or just the highlights? I think it was just the highlights,
I don't
right?
think we were like super like
Exhaustive.
meticulous about it. Yeah, it wasn't exhaustive. I think I didn't even really talk about like my favorite record of theirs, Soap Opera. I remember afterwards being like, oh, I barely said anything about it. So no, we just sort of just talked more about the oeuvre of the Kinks, I guess. So
Which was
yeah,
great. I'm sure we'll talk about the Kinks again. But yes, Matthew is joining me basically full time as a co-host, as second mic. We like second mic more than co-host. That sounds a little bit more, it sounds cooler, I think.
yeah, yeah. It's homely.
Yeah, it's homely. It's homely. Yeah, and so henceforth, because we're both named Matt or Matthew, I think, we'll just do our surnames. You're
Yeah,
you're Frester and I'm Sini.
it's just like high school again. You just get last named everywhere.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah. So especially if there's a lot of yeah, there's a lot of Matthews around when I was in school
Same.
anyway.
I
Yeah.
every grade I was in, there was always at least one other Matthew, like, and it'd always be the only name there was duplicates of. So as a kid, I had
Mhm.
this thought that it was like, I think for our generation, it is like a very popular name. So, yeah, there's,
He's the most sensible apostle. He was a tax collector. He
yeah,
probably did all the finances with like all the with all the disciples. Like he was probably very sensible and practical, and unlike me, I don't know how practical you are, but
eh,
it's a good, sensible, practical name.
I believe it means God's gift.
It does. Yeah, true that.
Yeah.
But so yeah, welcome to the God's Gift podcast.
The gifts of God.
Gifts of God podcast. No, so yeah, we're going to be doing basically getting back into it. I've been on a bit of hiatus because like lots of family stuff going on, but that's all behind us now. And yeah, we're getting back into it, and we're getting into this week a little bit of William Burroughs, which I I kind of, after reading this book, like I think the first time I read this book was I was still in my 20s. And after reading this book now, I kind of was I almost canceled this episode because I was like, why did I select this? Why did I do this to myself? Like,
Yeah.
um,
I would
because
not have been mad if you had either, because
yeah,
I think we're probably going to have similar thoughts about it.
because we're grumpy old men, Fresta. That's what's
Yeah.
going on, I think. But I think so William Burroughs was like a kind of key figure in the Beat generation, which was a kind of movement in the US based mostly around San Francisco. It involved people like Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, people like that. A lot of it came out of sort of beatnik kind of poetry. That's where the name comes from, I guess. And it's all about not being square, man, and like trying to be like anti-establishment and kind of anti the sort of usual ways of constructing narratives, and very experimental. And the funny thing about Burroughs is, I think it was on System of Systems, they did an episode of Naked Lunch, didn't they? And that was very funny because everyone hated it. Like the Naked Lunch,
it was either TPN or System of Systems, but Adam and Jack discussed it.
Yeah,
and I believe Adam's quite a fan of Burroughs, but Jack did not seem to like it.
But so Naked Lunch is I don't like Naked Lunch either. I tried to reread it like recently, but Naked Lunch is probably the most well known of his literary works, the novels, and that obviously a lot of that probably comes from the Cronenberg adaptation,
which is quite good.
It's quite good, an improvement for sure.
It's more like based on the spirit of the book than being like a one-to-one adaptation.
Yeah, and the way I always thought about these, so we're looking at The Place of Dead Rose, which is actually the second in a part of a trilogy. I think the final kind of works of fiction that William Burroughs did, and it's the second in the trilogy. It's not really, the trilogy itself is not really linked narratively. It's sort of like thematically, and there are a couple of like crossover characters. And I say characters with, I use that term very loosely because I don't think he believes in, square notions of characters, man. Like characters are just boxing me in, man. Like it's
yeah,
it's a lot of that kind of attitude going in. So the reason I don't even know the reason I chose The Place of Dead Roads. It was just that.
It was because you asked me what I was reading, and that was one of the books I was reading.
Oh, thank you for reminding me.
I think you had fond memories of it, so you're like, yeah, let's revisit that.
Yeah, and it's funny because reading it back, I remember when I was sort of getting into, gay experimental literature, and like, William Burroughs is the Venn diagram of gay and experimental literature. It's like, it's just this real, I don't even want to say poetic, but just like mangling of like words and sentences and ideas, and like just jumbling it all up into like almost like a fruit salad of like concepts and sentences and paragraphs that I think is very heady to like a younger person. Well, and I think this is actually the case with a lot of the beat writers in general. So this includes people like Ginsberg and Kerouac especially. I don't know if you've read Kerouac on the road or anything like that.
Never read any other beat writers, and I couldn't tell you any of the names other than the two you've mentioned.
Yeah. They're the most famous. But Kerouac is one of those things where like it's On the Road is the big novel, and it's basically just about traveling across America and back and forth, like on the driving or hitching a train or things like that. And, that sense of freedom and like, no responsibilities and this kind of like anarchic craziness of youth, like it really appeals to like teenagers and, early 20 somethings. But once you get a little bit older, it's just like, you just can't deal with it anymore, because it's like you just want these people to grow up. And one of the things that I've found with William Burroughs, as I feel like I've outgrown him, is that he's someone who almost never had to grow up. And this is a problem with a lot of gay men. I find that lots of them don't grow up because they don't have to, because usually we don't have. Yeah, and junkies, yeah, which we'll talk about in the Patreon episode, but a little bit here too as well. Like, but no responsibilities, no duties, just like anarchism all the time, sort of thing. And this is, it's just very old hat to me. Like, I don't care about anarchistic shit anymore. I don't want to hear about it. Like, and I don't want to deal with the repercussions of those people and their lifestyles, you know, and I definitely don't want to read about it.
Yeah.
So that's my opening salvo about this book.
And especially in the way he does it, where it's not like this reflective thing of to be like, oh, I was a bit, you know, foolhardy-ish, whatever the word is. He's more like still just like adamant that he's right. And like in that book, it has just this like it is a good book, I suppose. There's lots of cool pseudo philosophical parts of it, but then there's just kind of a sneering, contempty kind of like, you know, it's like, and you can see the steeple of their fucking churches sticking up, and it's just like, really? That's the enemy, the church? Okay.
Yeah.
Like, there's just like there's bits that definitely are thought provoking and interesting, but yeah, it's sort of the kind of book I wish I'd read 10, 15 years ago. Like, I read Junkie when I was 23 or something, and I remember that being pretty good and liking that. But again, I was probably a completely different person back then, so I don't know if I would like it now. Although I didn't read very much at all in my 20s, and for a book for me to finish it, it had to be pretty easy to read. So at least Junkie had the continual narrative that you could follow and like get engaged in. Whereas this, it's just like every time it starts, like a new sort of little, I think he calls them routines or whatever, but like when it's like a narrative thing, it just breaks off and then goes into this like swirling whirlwind of, you know, voices chiming in and ellipsis starting and ending sentences, and like you just lose you get discombobulated. And I don't know, for some people maybe that's cool, but I'm just it's not for me. I found that tedious.
Yeah. And yes, I find that tedious too. And I'm really, you know, younger me might have been like, that's the point, man.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't give a shit if that's the point. Like, I don't like it. And I'm kind of over it, you know, like I'm kind of over this sort of shit. Like, I think you need to, for me, call me old fuddy-duddy conservative or whatever, but for me, you need to like, there needs to be something more there, you know, like one of the things that he does and probably contributes to this swirling kind of vortex thing that you're talking about is one of his experimental techniques is called the cut-up technique, which is basically, this isn't exclusive to Burroughs. Like a lot of Dadaists in France did this, and some other beats as well used to do it as well. But it's basically taking bits of text, cutting it out, and then sort of arranging them, you know, to form something else, like something that the original sentence might not have meant or whatever, and combining it all together. It's kind of like those. Have you ever seen those? The magnet poetry where you get like blocks of like different words. Yeah, it's kind of like that. And so, yeah, it's just sort of arranging stories, or not even stories, just like scenes or routines, like you said, into different configurations. And it sort of, while that's interesting, I feel like Burroughs kind of just leaves it at that. Like, I feel like it's a good way. David Bowie did this actually. Like he had like I forget he did a version of this with his lyrics, I think, where he just sort of remixed, you know, different things. But David Bowie, there's always a sense of, you know, he's got some kind of narrative control or thematic control over it. Whereas Burroughs, it's just like, here's some random shit I just arranged. And there's no kind of like organizing principle to it.
Well, yeah, sometimes it kind of does have like a cool echoey effect where you're like, wait, I've read this before. Sometimes I feel like it kind of pulls it off in this haunting kind of like, echoey way. And I think there's like a whole like, because I think Brian Geisen or whatever was one who told him about or introduced him to the cut up effect. And I know he was kind of like using it as this kind of like a cult kind of practice, like some kind of like, I guess it would be like black magic sort of thing. And I mean, I don't know exactly how it was supposed to work or what it was supposed to achieve, but like, cause you know, the whole book's very like Gnostic in the sense of like, is like this sort of like, you know, evil controllers of reality. And like, he's the main character, Kim Carson's, is sort of trying to like, you know, like there's this movie running through it and it keeps like sort of referencing the directors and the people making the movie, and like he's trying to like disrupt the like rolling of the film to break out of time and space. I just think it could have been done, like tied it all together in more of like a flowing narrative way that would have, and I guess, we're going to hit the criticism of that's the point. It's not supposed to be like that, but it just doesn't make it enjoyable to read, like it makes it tedious. And ultimately that's what I kind of want out of a book. Like the previous book in this trilogy, The Cities of the Red Knight, is much more enjoyable to read. It's still kind of like, is frustrating in a way that like it kind of halts certain like plots, and it doesn't really like I really liked the like kind of like guy, the detective, sort of the weird like noir aspect guy, the detective solving the thing and using like sex magic to travel through time and all that stuff like that. Like that's cool. But then it's just frustrating. It doesn't really like, it sort of just breaks off. And I remember there's something when you're just like back in some like sort of Mexican style like village thing that's being kind of like stampeded or something like that. And like again, it starts like getting into the tornado-y thing at the end where it's just starts shattering into pieces. And like, I don't know. Maybe if I'd read it at a different point in my life or something, it would have seemed really cool and stuff. And I also just think like right now in the year 2024, the year of our Lord 2024, like we've just had so many just crazy movies and shows that are trying to like break the mold and do all this trippy thing, like where I just kind of feel fatigued with all of that sort of stuff and just want like a nice story, that flows and makes sense. Like it can be, I like postmodern writing too. I guess you'd say this is postmodern, but someone like Thomas Pynchon obviously does it much better, where you still like, like Inherent Vice is like a postmodern stoner noir thing that while you don't really get like answers out of it, like the whole thing flows together. You follow the same character, you're invested in the story, you care what's going to happen, and it still kind of makes this same point of like, well, he's making a different point, I guess, of sort of like more information, less meaning kind of thing. And whereas this just, I don't know, just something. I think it's like you're onto with like the Burroughs just being like a 80-year-old like junkie who won't grow up. Like at this point, like, and apparently this is like one of his best books. Or you know what I mean? Like I can't imagine like the Nova trilogy's like if this is better than that.
Yeah, this is the quote unquote mature Burroughs, which is, I just think that just means late because it's the later books. But it's funny that you mentioned Junkie as well, because I was going to bring that up, as well as Queer. So those are the first two novels of his, and both of them were like pulpy novels. And so the thing about pulp novels as well is that they're very plot heavy, so it's just like at the end of a chapter, something dramatic has to happen, and that needs to lead into the next chapter, and so on and so forth. And I feel like when he had those rails, he was actually not bad. Like I think Junkie was, like you said, a really easy to read. Queer was sort of the same, although that would be that book would be a little bit like controversial today, because there's lots of boys in Tangiers, let's just say, which was such a thing for like homosexuals back in the, early 20th century. But so those were written in the 50s, and they really were that this kind of cheap, tawdry, kind of fiction that was very plot heavy. And I think maybe he just got, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do like all this really, he was sort of reacting against the formulaic kind of, the formula of pulp, maybe, and that being a way in which he could say fuck you to dad or whoever, because he also came from money. So that's a thing as well. Like with a lot of these, and this is why it gets so tiresome as well with this kind of stuff you're talking about, this deconstructionist kind of way of writing and creating things. It's like, it's always done by people who can afford to be deconstructive and like be like, whereas I think you need something to grasp onto, the rest of us who can't afford that,
I've had I've had about enough of reality being deconstructed. I think I'm sure there's good examples of it. By all means, if anyone wants to point me in the direction of one, I'll give it a chance. But yeah, this book was like, I even read this book twice. Like I read it all the way through, and then I got the Audible audiobook, which was actually much better. It worked much better because I guess I didn't have the voice right in my head either and stuff. Like it works kind of better with an audiobook. And the same with The Cities of Red Night. I listened to that on Audible, and then I was like, I must have missed something. And then I bought the book and read it again, and no, I didn't like miss anything. It's just the way it is. And so I've read both these books twice, and I'm like, I guess I'm gonna have to read the Western Lands twice, like to finish the trilogy. Like, and I'm guessing that's probably even because that's more like about the Egyptian, like Western lands where the soul goes after death and tied to.
I remember that reading that one very young as well, and being a little bit. I think maybe if I read it again, I'd probably be a little bit more, kind of amenable to that one, because that one is a very like it's sort of the spiritual culmination of it, I guess, which is all still just like Gnostic bullshit as well, which, your mileage may vary with that, but like, it's very influenced by the Egyptian concept of the Ka, the spirit, which is very, it's sort of threaded throughout all three of these books. But I just remember it being a little bit more coherent, in the final book. And there's a lot of, there's a little bit of reference to it in The Place of Dead Roads, but it comes in a bit stronger with the assassin guy, what's his name?
Hassan or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Who's like, nothing is true, everything is permitted, which, by the way, is like, I think that's the guy in the first Assassin's Creed. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah. You're in the fortress of that assassin who said that.
Wait, that's a Burroughsian universe game?
Yeah, pretty much. No, he was an actual historical figure.
Oh, he's a real guy. Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah. Yeah, so the interesting touchstone there. But yeah, I did wanted to get because, you've got a bit of a background in like the music stuff where like you've got similar things going on in music, particularly with like people who are just making music, quote unquote, with like distortion pedals and shit like that. So how do you see any kind of resonances there with like, let's deconstruct music, man, like that sort of stuff?
Well, that's the kind of the one context I don't mind, like deconstructionism and postmodernism and stuff, is when it's like applied to like music. Like, there's some like cool like deconstructed rock and roll kind of stuff out there, or like noise artists and things like that. There's even there's a Brisbane, I think, I'm not sure if they're specifically Brisbane based, but it's like I'm completely blanking on the name. Browning Mummery. I know they have like an album called The Western Lands, which is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think they're just reading straight from the Western Lands, and they're a kind of like a collagist kind of, it's like electronic. They have all kinds of stuff. Some of their stuff's kind of dubby and some of it's kind of more noisy, but I think you can like buy their whole discography off Bandcamp pretty cheap. So they're a cool artist for anyone else interested in that kind of stuff. But yeah, otherwise, like, as you were saying with the David Bowie thing, when you were saying he did the cut up method thing, I was just like thinking at the time, it's like, yeah, well, at least you got like some cool music to accompany with it. I don't really care if lyrics don't make sense, like I don't, you know what I mean? There's a lot of songs where I'll listen to them 100 times, then eventually like it can be like one of my favorite songs, and then I'll just like one day all of a sudden pay attention to the lyrics, and I'm like, I never noticed what it said in this song before. So yeah, and that kind of stuff, like that's just because I guess you've got like, with reading is more work, so you've got to like, if it's all broken up and you've got to like follow it and make it make sense, and like you can like tune out really easily and just be reading words without like actually understanding them or like really even paying attention to it. Whereas like music, like, yeah, you can tune it out too, but if like it's just a different purpose, if you're just trying to listen to something because it's enjoyable, and yeah, if it's all cut up and distorted and deconstructed, it's just, and I got to be in the mood for that. Like people who listen to that stuff all the time and all they ever listen to tend to be kind of like a bit like unstable. But if someone doesn't just once in a while need to stick Bob Dylan on or Leonard Cohen or something like that, or whatever, ABBA, like, yeah, it's the same with like someone who's just into metal or hardcore. If that's like all they listen to, I'm kind of like, you're unbalanced. Like you need to just like put like, you know, something normal on just for a change.
Yeah, it's
Smokey
sus.
Robinson.
I think it's sus.
Yeah.
But like with music, I think you're right that music, it's different because music is already like a kind of abstraction. Like it's not tethered to anything that you have, like your interpretation of it like happens almost immediately. Like you just receive it. And so like music can just, you know, you can afford to be a little bit more, I don't know, loosey-goosey with it, for want of a better word. But like, yeah, when you do it with literature, I feel like, I don't know, I just have no time for it anymore. I used to be like a little bit more, you know, mind blown about it. It's like, oh, wow, this is so cool, man. I didn't realize the possibilities. And now I'm at a point in my life where I want less possibilities for people. Like I want people to be like, if you're going to write a novel, like I want there to be like a romance plot, super formulaic. I want like, you know, I don't want any experimentation. I just want like, give me a straightforward narrative. Like prove to me that you can do that. And then maybe you can go off and do like your experimental poetry, which I'm not going to buy, you know, like.
Yeah. Like, and especially with this kind of like, you know, yeah, like maybe once if I'd read this a long time ago, it would have been a bit more mind blown from it. But it's not like it's introducing any new concepts to me. Like, no. It's like, yeah, Philip K. Dick does the Gnostic thing way better. And his books are like, you can just burn through like a 300-page book of his in like 3 days. Like he knew how to write real well and like it's fun. He also did drugs and stuff, but I guess he had to like make a living, you know? So his take on Gnosticism is more interesting. Like I didn't find myself being like mind blown by it. It's just then all I'm left with is the labor of piecing this thing together. Yeah.
And I think the popularity of Burroughs basically came from people who weren't aware of like those, you know, new wave science fiction writers like Philip K. Dick, like Alfred Bester, like the other person I was thinking of when I was reading this was Samuel Delany, who did all of this shit like and did it way better. Like, you know, the idea of language being a weapon, like he did that in what was it called, Babel 17, and in a few other books as well. They just piss all over this shit, and I think that people he got this reputation, one, because he was part of the Beats, which was like this kind of well-known, really kind of subcultural thing that became really popular with the youth culture. But two, also because none of these people had read any of that stuff. So like it did seem novel to a lot of people outside of like, you know, science fiction nerds who'd read like Philip K. Dick or something like that. So I think, not sure that I'm as impressed as I used to be.
Yeah. I think Burroughs is one of those people whose like biography is more interesting than his writing. Like he did live a fascinating life, like whether or not it came from money or whatever, like, and he like, so like, I mean, I would just suggest anyone to listen to the Art of Darkness episodes on him to get the story. Like that's pretty much where I'm going to be drawing from for any of the facts about his life that if I bring up in this episode is going to be from listening to those Art of Darkness episodes. I've not actually read the biography about him or you know, Junkie is what do you call it? It would be sort of autofiction, really. It's sort of autobiographical, but obviously some flights of fancy. I haven't read Queer. I have a copy of it. But that would be the one I would read next if I was going to read Burroughs again, which may be a year or two before I feel like I can stomach it.
Delve into that, Dionysian swamp.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't know. I might have missed my window. I should have probably read it all. Like I probably should have just read through his canon after I finished Junkie. Like, But I might have got stuck too. I might have back then started reading Cities of the Red Knight and been like, what the fuck is this bullshit? Going back to reading nothing.
That's what you, with the beats in general, I think that's the case, is that you really, I used to say this all the time, but I about Kerouac especially, but I think about all of them, including Burroughs, is you actually need to first read them before you turn 25, because if you read them after that, you just want to throttle them all.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
just like, shut the fuck up, you know? Yeah, but in terms of his life, I think maybe, I don't know if we'll ever do another episode on William Burroughs. Certainly not for a while, but
Yeah,
he did
no rush for
have
that.
he did have a interesting life. Lived a while, saw a lot of things. Came from money. I think it was from St. Louis originally.
I believe so, yeah.
He killed his first wife.
Yeah.
He literally shot his first wife. Yeah, I think that was in the 50s. Her name was Joan Vollmer, I think, if I recall correctly.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and they were in Mexico. This is the thing about the Beats as well, is that they would travel to and fro between like the states and like down south in Mexico and Central America and stuff. William Burroughs was always looking for like this like, I think, mythical like root drug thing. I forget what it was called, Yage or something like that, wasn't it?
Oh,
It was,
Yaga,
yeah.
yeah.
Is it real or mythical? I don't know. It was like
I assumed it's some kind of, I thought it was just like another name for peyote or ayahuasca or something.
ayahuasca.
But
Yeah.
I don't know really. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. But he killed his wife. And apparently he said that he shot her, and apparently he said that it was because they were doing like a William Tell situation. Like he put an apple or something on her head and was trying to shoot the apple.
Put a glass on her head. And it was apparently a routine they would do, like a party trick thing, but I think he was just like drunker than he realized. And she was kind of like a beard wife, you know what I mean? Like more like a confidant friend that I think he married to help out for some reason, to so she wouldn't have to get married to someone else or something like that. And yeah, they were like drunk at in the room with like other people were there to witness it. And yeah, he's like, put the glass on your head, and he shot her, and like was like pretty horrified when he realized what he'd done. And but then yeah, like got out of town so he wouldn't have to ever face any real consequences for that.
I think he was
like,
yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say, and I believe like his whole life he was kind of like, that's where his kind of Gnostic stuff comes from. He kept just sort of like dodging the blame for himself by saying like there was this kind of like demonic force that like forced him to do that, and like he was like always trying to like uncover the real, like, you know, the archons of reality or whatever that had caused him to do that, rather than just like accepting that like he made poor choices.
I'm rolling my eyes just listening to that.
Yeah.
It's just like, fucking be a man and take responsibility. That's whenever I hear this shit, that's all I think now. Like, you know, whereas like, I think when you're young, that appeals to you because it's just like, I'm sounding real old man yells at cloud right now, but like, it really does. Like, it's just true that, you know, no boundaries, man. I'm free and I can do whatever I want. And like anything that happened that's bad is not my fault. It's really kind of the narcissism of youth, right? Like that you have no obligations to anyone and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, but you know, I'm just tired of it. I'm just old and tired of it.
Yeah. I have little sympathy for his story, at least, you know, like I get he had a rough life in a sense, but like it does seem very much like self-brought upon. And yeah, he didn't really ever face any consequences for it, you know, like, so what's there to feel sympathy for?
Yeah. And was still, I can't remember. I was reading this like a couple of weeks ago because we've been playing this for a while, but did he get clean towards the end of his life? I think he was pretty much.
Yeah, I think he spent less time addicted to these sort of drugs than he makes out. Like, I think there was a period early on, and it wasn't even really heroin. It was more like over the counter or like prescription drugs like morphine and Dilaudid and some other things I couldn't tell you the names of. Like, so I think he had spent most of his life clean, really. He just sort of like, that was sort of his character that he was into. So yeah, I think he was towards his, I don't know exactly. I know he was sort of like shooting bits of wood and stuff like that in his later years and hanging out with Kurt Cobain and other like sort of celebrities in his late years. And because I guess of this sort of like myth of this character or whatever, like people were drawn to it. And, but yeah, I don't think he was like, the image of him is that he was just like a hopeless junkie for his whole life and stuff. But like, they usually do not live that long if they're doing it that often, sort of thing. And
yeah.
I
feel like a concerned mother because I'm just like, well, then why is he projecting that image to, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not even that like I'm concerned by like the social impact. It's more that just like, I just feel it's lame, you know, especially if you're not, I don't know. I'm not trying to say that like it'd be okay if he was, you know, still a junkie or whatever, but that romanticizing of it is just sort of like, it's just so, it's just lame. I don't know how else to sort of express it, but that I just don't, it just doesn't impress me. It didn't really impress me. The stuff about the writing and stuff impressed me in the sense of, oh, he really went there, especially in the really early stuff, like queer stuff. But the drug stuff has always been like just really lame to me. Like, I think a lot of people feel that it's important to, you know, depict that honestly. And Junkie, I've never been a junkie, so I don't know, but Junkie, by all accounts, is a very honest depiction of it, like a very kind of, you know, warts and all, you know, depiction of it. But that kind of snowballed into this romanticization of like being a globe-trotting homosexual kind of junkie who just can do it whatever he pleases, you know. And then in the final books, they're kind of, the organizing principle around it is like that assassin guy who's got this motto, you're like, nothing is true, everything is permitted. And I feel like that is so ingrained in like our society now, and it's just really annoying because it's not true. That is not true actually, but everyone proceeds as if it is. So he's partially responsible for that.
Yeah, I got nothing to add to that. I agree.
But yeah, do you have anything else that you would like to say about this book or Burroughs in general, or?
I guess about the book, like, I guess it's interesting that like the main character is Kim Carson's, but then there's also like the William Stewart Hall, who's clearly like meant to be like, it's sort of like never clear if they're two distinct people or if one's the pen name of the other. And then sometimes the book even breaks into like first person perspective. So there's clearly like some narrator that's part of the like, you know, the Johnsons, they're like little criminal kind of it's like sort of an underworld family kind of thing. They're like hobos in good standing with each other or something like that. And so like the main character, Kim Carson's, it sort of like seems somewhat like auto-fictional. Like he's a shootist, you know, he's a quick drawer. And like, I guess that's sort of referencing on the like Burroughs shooting his wife kind of thing. Like, and it's sort of, like there might be more confessional stuff in there that if you read between the lines, you can sort of draw out of it. I did enjoy it more on the second read through for sure, and like found some bits that I liked, and I like the stuff about like take your time, like he's talking about when you're quick drawing, like every quick shootist has his time, like that's how long it takes him to like draw his weapon, aim, and like hit the target, and if you make someone rush, they'll miss the target. And like he's, you know, talking with, and there's that scene with the Mike Chase character, which it seems like an echo through the book where it happens like 3 times, but it always kind of goes slightly differently, where he like quick draws him in the graveyard or something like that. And first time, like he pulls his gun out, he pulls his fingers out with no gun and just like, bang, you're dead, making the other guy, Mike, draw his weapon and not take his time. He shoots fast and so he knows he's going to like miss, and then he gets to take his time then to actually have a proper shot. And like
that would be good in like a Louis L'Amour style like Western, rather than just this like hodgepodge of like, oh, it's a genre deconstruction, you know, like it would just that kind of shit would be awesome in like just a straight, no pun intended, Western story, you know. But it was just you got to pick through it for these little gems, you know.
Yeah, like that. I mean, I guess, you know, you could probably find stuff that exists like that. There is these straight, obviously there's cowboy tales and stuff like that, but like he still could have done it like with all the gross, like the grossly described sex and stuff like that. And like he has kind of a good language, the way he knows how to set up like a disgusting image kind of thing, like the smells, you can almost like smell it yourself, and the way he describes things. There's a lot of fun little things in there. If he just like made a straight like kind of cowboy story with the Johnsons and followed it all the way through, and then he could still have all of his little like tidbits and like use he could
get his subversive jollies. Like, this is the thing that people don't realize. I think that a lot of artists and writers and stuff don't realize is that if you want to really like be subversive, which I think is a juvenile like impulse anyway, but if you really want to be subversive, make just a straight narrative and like, you know, subvert it through the narrative and the archetypes and all that sort of shit. Like, don't just like present us with a clusterfuck and just say, oh, I'm queering literature. You know what I mean? Like,
back to the music thing too, you get that in music where people like don't know how to like sort of make a complete song or album, and then it's just like, oh, it's sort of lo-fi or it's deconstructed, and you know, like bands I've been a part of may even be able to accurately be accused of that. Like it is kind of like, because I know I've made that kind of music, and I know that somewhere in my brain was also the impulse of like, well, it's much easier to do it this way, like to not have it like sound clean and good is actually like, because if you're going to make something sound clean and good, then it has to be really good. You know what I mean? You ever hear like a band where they like fully produce it properly, but they just got like whatever riffs, and it's just like some like, you know what I mean? When you hear like a modern punk album that's cleanly recorded, like nothing sucks more than that. So it's like, well, you know, you don't have the chops to do it good, you know? So it's like, well, if you're going to do that stuff, you're going to use the like recording process as an instrument itself. And like, and maybe you do have an interesting idea, and and I like some of that kind of music, you know, to a degree. Like I said, I still need to, listen to Bob Dylan in between. So it's definitely like, you just want them to like put in a bit more effort and like make it enjoyable, because that's more subversive to make something like that anyone can enjoy, like Lolita or something, a book that's heralded as a classic, and it's super fun. Like, you know, I was just finishing it up today, so that's why I'm talking about it. But like, it's subversive, especially for the time it's written, and but it's fun. Like, it's a romp, you know, like and it's, you know, he's doing something like pretty heady there, but like just about anyone could read that and enjoy it. Like, that's way more subversive than to just have this thing that no one's going to read, or only like some freaks are going to read, and idiots like us who talk about it on a podcast. Like, and to be honest, that's the thing as well. Like, I think subversion is overrated, but if you want to do it, like, especially now, like, I think it would be a good time. And I think there are some people who are doing it, who subvert the modern kind of liberal order at the moment, which is great. Like, and it's almost so subtle that most people can't see it. And that's when it's like really delicious, you know? So it's something like,
but
White
like,
Lotus is kind of doing that now, where like, and because it has that thing where it's sort of like allows for multiple interpretations. So people can just be like, no, it's saying the thing I agree with. And like, then the person on the other side's like, actually, it's saying the opposite of that. And, you know, maybe we're the ones being trolled who think it's appealing to us, you know?
Maybe that's true.
I don't think so.
I like the point you made about the music, and like, you know, it's much easier to just say, you know, oh yeah, I meant it this way, because whenever I've had like a bad, or not even a bad, but just like a little bit of a rough recording on the podcast, I'm just like, it's an experimental audio
Yeah.
experience. So yeah, did you have anything more to say about this book?
I think in relation to like the movies we're going to talk about, so they can sort of wait.
Mm,
Otherwise,
okay.
off the top of my head, not that I can remember, no.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to finish up with this like an amazing review of this. I'm going to read it all because it's so
Oh, right.
good.
Goodreads review.
No, it's not a Goodreads review. It's a Kirkus review, and it was published in 2001, I think, for one of the reprints of The Place of Dead Roads. But it's by one, I can't remember who wrote it. I'm just trying to look for doesn't have the reviewer's name. But it's wonderful. I love it. Okay, here we go. It becomes more and more difficult to believe that Burroughs can be seriously read by anyone much over 21, by anyone but a post-adolescent with a self-congratulatory streak of perversity. The Burroughs formula, after all, is by now dog-eared. A young, polymorphous, homosexual hero takes on the Manichaean bad guys of the world, vanquishing them through various tricks of time-pleading, cunning, or drug use. And in this new installment, through a large caliber dependence on, and fascination with, guns of all kind. Here, then, backed by an honorable bunch of outlaws, young Kim Carson, pulp novelist and exquisite triggerman, blasts away at his foes, the FDA, with their legislation aimed at outlawing liquor, drugs, gambling, private sexual behavior, or the possession of firearms, the English, the Italian mafia in America, and dogs, with repeated descriptions of assorted, grisly dog executions. We forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
There are effective sequences now and again. Burroughs allows himself to write lyrically of his St. Louis boyhood in an impressionistic, if also familiar, clutch of passages. And there's an amusing, speculative science fiction section on language shots, by which a language can be inculcated through the body's cells by injection. The rest, however, is more of the usual nonsense, notched to Burroughs' own anarchic sensibility, but ultimately no more convincing than the programmatic novels of Ayn Rand, a Robert Rimmer. Routines and schticks, blackly comic, were what gave Burroughs his initial distinction, but now they have lost their spleen and have become mere eccentricity, puerility. In sum, then, only for the coterie. I love that.
Yeah,
I love
good.
that final bit. It's only for the coterie, which is a good way of summing it up. I think that like it's not, William Burroughs is not for you. Basically, is the way you would sum it up.
Yeah. No. Yeah, and you're right. We forgot to mention the dog thing. Like, is a specific type of like dog hatred that's like, it's just comes off as just mean-spirited and puerile. Like,
and inhuman.
It's like, oh wow, like you hate dogs. Like I get it. Like the dog culture is a bit maybe much at the moment with people who like bring dogs into restaurants and stuff like that, and you can get a bit like, it's more the dog owners that I kind of get annoyed at.
It's not the puppy's fault.
Yeah,
it's not their fault.
And heaps of dogs are cool. Like so, but it's just like in the Burroughs thing, it's like, yeah, it just comes off as like sort of cheap shots, and then the way the main character is always portrayed as this kind of like all of the like downtrodden characters think he's cool, and the Mexican woman and stuff like that all like him. Like he paints his character too to be like without like, flaws, or his flaws are turned into virtues. And like there's some things, like there's like, I highlighted some things. So it was like kind of, you can sort of half get on board with it. Like it was like I think he's talking about like, he listed, or I'll just read out this bit. It was, I guess it's like sort of something to do with the Johnsons. He's like, he listed the objectives and characteristics of the aliens. They support any dogmatic religious system that tends to stupefy and degrade the worshippers. They support the slave gods. They want blind obedience, not intelligent assessment. They stand in the way of every increase in awareness. They only conceded around Earth and allowed the development of science to realize the even more stupefying potential of the Industrial Revolution. They support any they support any dogmatic authority. They are the arch conservatives. 3, they lose no opportunity to invert human values. They are always self-righteous. They have to be right because in human terms they are wrong. Objective assessment drives them to hysterical frenzy. 4, they are parasitic. They live in human minds and bodies. 5, the Industrial Revolution, with its overpopulation and emphasis on quantity rather than quality, has given them a vast reservoir of stupid, bigoted, uncritical human hosts. The rule of the majority is to their advantage, since the majority can always be manipulated. Their most potent tool of manipulation is the word, the inner voice. 7, they will always support any measures that tend to stultify the human host. They will increase the range of arbitrary and dogmatic authority. They will move to make alcohol illegal. They will move to regulate the possession of firearms. They will move to make drugs illegal. 8, they are more at home occupying women than men. Once they have a woman, they have the male she cohabits with. Women must be regarded as the principal reservoir of the alien virus parasite. Women and the religious sons of bitches, above all, religious women. It's kind of interesting. There's like half of it you could, like, he's sort of coming from like a, you know what I mean? He's not your typical kind of leftist sort of thing. Like he's definitely like would have been a leftist for the time, but there's definitely things where he would sort of, you know, upset the leftists of nowadays kind of thing. But then it's also just like, he's like, oh, it's the church again. Or it's, oh, heaven forbid people want heroin to be illegal. Like there's a story about him, like with the, like his tape recorder magic stuff he did, where he like some cafe that like kicked his junkie friends out because they passed out in the cafe and they were upset. And he was like, oh, it's an outrage. How could a cafe not let junkies sleep in it? And so he goes there and he like records the ambient noise of the cafe one day, and then he comes back another day, and like the theory is you like play the recording at like inaudible volume, and then you very slowly just like turn the volume up until like so no one notices it mixing in with the ambience of the restaurant. And then apparently he claims that he caused some kind of disruption there where like this fight broke out and some guy got fired or something like that. It's like, what a loser. Like you fucking your junkie friends, like it's like this indignation that they have a right to like pass out at a cafe.
Yeah. But that's a thing as well. This is a broader thing that I did want to talk about, but I think we kind of mentioned it, but that, you know, the Beats with their kind of deconstructionist nonsense of like instability of language and like ideas about society and all that sort of stuff came out of a very stable time, right?
Yeah.
So and we now live in an extremely unstable time. So anyone who is doing that now is almost like, that's why it's so lame to me, because it's just like, well, basically you're just vomiting out the status quo back to us. So that's why it becomes, at this point in time in history, that's why it becomes so tiresome and tedious, because like we have chaos all around us in the culture and arts and stuff like that. So it's like there's nothing new here. It's just it's just more of the same. Yeah.
Well, it's like, you know, like
exactly
the most radical things in pop culture that happens is like Kanye being Christian, and that upsets more people than like, you know, anything else. Like it's like, to be subversive now, you have to be like a traditionalist. And even that's, you know, with the trad cath Twitter stuff gets tedious too. Like, so even that, like, you know what I mean? These things have such short cycles now that it's just like, you know, it's anarcho tyranny or something like that. I don't know if that's the correct term, but you know what I mean? Like it's just this like swirling mass of like stable chaos that just like, it's obviously stable in the sense we still have power and food and that stuff like that, although things are getting more expensive, but like there's just nothing to subvert anymore. And like, yeah, it's just, and then if you try to be normal and responsible, like it's just considered extremism.
Yeah. Which is why I think like artists just in general, writers, everyone should just let go of subversion. Like stop trying to subvert. Just like make something good.
Build something up again that can be subverted.
Make something really formulaic. How's
Yeah.
that? Try that. Just try it.
Yeah.
You know? But everyone's so like shying away from the formulaic, as if like the formulaic, like formulas for things are like the dominant. Like the
Yeah.
formula is not formula. The formula is like subverting formula. So it's like, just make something, like write a pulp novel instead of like a deconstructionist mess. Please,
Yeah.
for the love of God.
George. Low-fat cab meal. I'm on. Said I wanna. I hate you. You low-fat liners in cabaret. Unseen facts. Unseen knowledge. No fat lemons. I bite into a mountain. I want to fall into a hill, into the hill, into the hill, into the hill. Unseen knowledge, unseen facts, unseen footage. Unseen knowledge, unseen hills, unseen facts. Of facts. Of facts. Of facts. I had 2 broken bottles. I had 2 brown bottles and a white nose as I entered 5 years of confinement. This is a story that unfolded as it went on into the sea. Unseen footage and unseen facts, unseen requirements. Unseen extension, chicory tip in shopping central with the soundtrack again. All is beyond our equity, your future again. It seems dust puts Robin redbreast and buffet again. I'm seeing footage, I'm seeing facts, the exclamation.